about this time yesterday, almost to the second, that the Prime Minister told Susanna here that there are more levers that he can pull to ease the cost of living crisis, but that he thinks they're inappropriate.
Labour's Keir Starmer this morning told us he disagreed. Does that change anything for the government? We are joined now by the Environment Secretary, George Eustice. Very good morning to you, Mr. Eustice. Good morning. I just wonder how that interview went down yesterday amongst ministers and amongst Conservative MPs. Because, of course, there's a lot of reference to the cost of living at the moment and whether people at the top of government are in touch with what's happening for those people who are struggling.
Yes, look, we recognise that there are pressures on household budgets. There are inflationary pressures as we come out of the pandemic right around the world, obviously exacerbated by the war in Ukraine as well. So we're seeing inflation everywhere, including the US and Europe and, yes, here. And what we're having to do is to try and take proportionate action to help people. So we've put in place a rebate on council tax. There's going to be a further easement later this year of £200 to help people with those costs of energy bills. It won't remove all those increased costs, but it will help. We've increased the national living wage to £9.50. That will help those.
As you know, none of those help. We're talking about the Elsie moment. None of those will either help or they're things that people have to repay because they're loans to help, or they don't touch the sides. Yesterday, the Prime Minister opened the interview by saying, we're doing all we can. He then admitted there's more that we can do. What more are you going to do?
Well, the important thing is that the Prime Minister and the government judge at the moment that we have to be careful about borrowing lots more money and throwing it into an inflationary environment. So we're doing what we can for now. We announced a package of measures in the spring statement. Some of them have already taken effect, like the increase in the national living wage to £9.50, and that will help people on the lowest paid. Some of them will come through in July, like some of the changes on, for instance, national insurance thresholds. When the Prime Minister says there's more that we could...
That doesn't help people who are on benefits or pensioners, though,
well,
does it?
We've doubled the funding that we have in something called the Household Support Fund, which goes to local authorities. There's now £1 billion made available
Mr.
there
Eustice, but when
to
you
help people
talk
like
about
Elsie, who was on your programme.
This is the point, isn't it? You talk about £1 billion, and of course that sounds huge in the round. The point is that sometimes only translates to 150 quid for somebody who actually is eligible for it, and it's just a one-off to help with an emergency measure. So, you know, what are you going to do to help Elsie right now? People like Elsie, people who can't afford their energy bills, what are you going to do? Because one of the suggestions is that you look at the billions of profit that the energy companies are making, partly as a result of this crisis, and you say, you know what, you could give us back a little bit of that, and that would help right now.
Well, they give us back a lot of it already, in that we already have higher tax rates on oil companies, almost double the rate of tax of other companies. BP, for instance, on the profits they've made in the North Sea, will pay around £1 billion in tax. So they do make a significant contribution already. They have higher taxes already than the rest of business. And, you know, we keep these things under review. But the important thing is the Chancellor's very mindful of deterring investment in the North Sea. We've learnt the dangers and the perils of being over-reliant on other countries for our oil and gas supply. During this transition to net zero, it's vitally important that we continue to get supplies from the North Sea. We don't want to deter that investment.
Yes, but Mr. Eustice, we've got the chairman of BP saying that actually they are in a financial position to invest heavily in research and development, to get off fossil fuels and to pay a windfall tax. He's actually said that. He said he's perfectly happy to do both. Doesn't that torpedo what the Prime Minister said yesterday and what you've just said?
Well, the Chancellor, when he sets a tax regime, has got to set it for the sector as a whole. And something that, you know, the chairman or chief exec of one individual company, that's something he might have said at a press conference, that's not something that you can take as being a proxy for what would happen for the industry as a whole.
No, but it's a pretty significant straw in the wind, isn't it, when he goes on the record to say that. Look, I want to bring you back to this interview yesterday. I mean, obviously, we would expect you to be loyal to the Prime Minister and defend him. That's your job. It'd be very odd if you didn't. Let me read you the first paragraph, front page of a national newspaper this morning. Boris Johnson's fumbled defence of the government's record on the cost of living has exasperated Conservative MPs and sharpened fears about their party's performance in tomorrow's local elections. We know that getting on for 50 letters have been sent in questioning confidence in the Prime Minister, post-dated until after the election results tomorrow. Off the back of that, off the back of the interview yesterday, do you think the Prime Minister should be worried about his position within the party? Do you think he's going to be facing a challenge in the next few days?
Well, look, all Prime Ministers will always be very conscious of the mood in their parliamentary party, because no government can get anything done unless it enjoys the support of the parliamentary party as a whole. So, of course, the Prime Minister, will be thinking about these things. But for now, he's also making sure that we deal with some of the international challenges, like the problems in Ukraine, and that we give them the support they need, that we help steer our economy through this period where we're getting some inflationary pressures. And up and down the country, we've got councillors fighting elections on local issues, things like planning, things like local council tax, and we're doing our part, and the Prime Minister's playing his part to support our councillors in those campaigns for tomorrow's election.
Those backbenchers are saying, obviously not on the record, but to journalists at Westminster, that they were pretty unimpressed with the Prime Minister's performance yesterday, and he's their leader, and they expect him to do better. Come on, what did you think of his performance yesterday? It wasn't his best, was it?
Well, I think he gave a very thorough and a very long interview, and I know people have made an issue around this individual case of Elsie, but, in response to that, he listed a whole range of things that we're doing to try to help people with their energy bills, to try to help pensioners, and things like the Warm Homes discount that's there sometimes to support older
something
people,
which Elsie is already claiming. Look,
that's
inflation's
right,
rising,
eligible.
food prices rising, biggest in a decade, energy bills rising, and they're going to go up again in October. Petrol prices rising, taxes rising, food bank use is rising, people in poverty, the numbers of children in poverty rising. Meanwhile, benefits aren't rising, even in line with inflation. You're simply not doing enough, are you?
Well, look, we've got around 1 million job vacancies at the moment, and we've increased the national living wage. It sends a very powerful signal to people that work pays and it's worth working. And we've made some changes to the way the universal credit works so that people can keep more of the money that they earn. So we've got a number of things to try to support people who are trapped on benefits.
So you think think that the Conservative government is doing enough? Is that the bottom line?
I think we're doing what is proportionate now. We're not pretending that we are able to borrow money to pay for all of those increased costs linked to the gas price, but we're doing everything we can to mitigate those impacts and to help families through this period. But, this is the problem.
So beyond this, the advice from you as a government, senior government minister is we're doing as much as we can. Beyond this, you're on your own, or you should go and get a job. That's what I'm hearing.
Well, what we're saying to people is there are job vacancies there. There are around 1 million job vacancies. It's a very tight labour market. We've seen wages for the lowest paid rising, and we've increased that national living wage.
I'm still not sure how that helps Elsie.
Well, you seem to be saying...
as I said, there is a hardship fund, which we referred to earlier, and you mentioned. She would be, I'm sure, given her circumstances, able to get access to that fund and should approach a local authority, because it's there precisely for these cases where people aren't working or they've got an individual issue they need some support with.
Well, you seem to be saying, and continuing from what the PM said yesterday, a no to a windfall tax on the energy companies. I'll make you a bet. I bet you in 2 weeks' time you'll have done a U-turn, but we'll see. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.